Hi there, thank you so much for joining me again on this channel. As always, I'm very grateful for all your likes, views and subscriptions from the last video. We're going to do some movies. We haven't done any for a little while, and I'd like to, if I may, speak to you and just introduce you to the Dark Knight Trilogy. I think it's worth saying that these little videos are not reviews of the film. They're just a reflection and highlighting some key ideas. So if you've not seen the film, just to be aware that there will be some plot things giving away, as it will be for all my videos on movies. So the Dark Knight Trilogy, directed by an extraordinary man by the name of Christopher Nolan, who up until that point, first two theatrical releases was a film called Memento from 2000, which I remember very, very clearly because at the time I was working as a projectionist in a cinema. We had to have a preview screening, so when the print comes in for a film, you'd watch it, make sure it was acceptable for theatrical presentation. And I was just completely blown away by this story of a man who cannot make new memories, trying to work out who murdered his wife. And he had this extraordinary, almost hypnotic and sort of storyline that's told in different threads and different ways. It's very disorientating, but I was completely arrested by the whole experience. And then in 2002 made a film called Insomnia, which has Al Pacino starring as a cop trying to track down a murderer, but he cannot sleep. And again, this idea of what is reality, what is a dream, what is actually going on. So when he picked up the Batman franchise, what we remember at this point is that the Batman franchise was dead in the water. Batman and Robin in 1997, including the infamous nipples on the Bat costume incident, had effectively just died. And George Clooney is very good about it, the fact that he played Batman at that time and said that he killed the franchise, got a very good sense of humour about it. But it didn't work out. And so it seems quite extraordinary that he was given this task, but it makes a lot of sense in many ways because he was able to bring to these trilogy of films, which, by the way, I watch at least once a year over a weekend, a new direction and a new interpretation. So let's have a little look at the first one, Batman Begins. Rather conveniently, it's a good title because it is about the start of how Batman came about. And of course, Batman is a vigilante, he's a crime fighter. And he has an identity which is to protect his real identity, which is that of the multi-billionaire Bruce Wayne. And the theme of Batman Begins, Nolan has said, is about fear. For those who don't know the origin story, Bruce Wayne, when he was 12 or so, his parents were murdered in a criminal incident. And in Batman Begins, we see young Bruce quitting college and literally coming to face his demons. And when he returns to Gotham City, he decides to actually become the Batman. And there's a particularly interesting scene where he faces his childhood friend, because what he needs to do is obviously protect the people he cares about by having this secret identity of the Batman. And his childhood friend is played by Katie Holmes, and she is now works in law. And she says to Bruce Wayne, when she sees him at this amazing swanky hotel / restaurant, she says to him, it's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me. Or it's not who you are underneath, but what you do that defines you. And Bruce is really hurt by this, but he recognises that, of course, he can't tell her until a bit later on in the movie, where actually he rescues her from a particular incident, and he quotes back at her, it's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me. And it's a really interesting moment because traditionally in superhero movies, you don't actually have the superhero revealing their identity. It's normally kept secret, and it's often can be quite an interesting plot point. But it's fascinating because or do we judge by motives or by outcomes? So what do I mean by this? Well, let's say, for example, you decide to go on holiday and you say, could you just look after my house, please? So you give me the keys and I go in and feed the plant and water the cat, or maybe that should be the other way around, do a bit of vacuuming, so forth and so on. But the day before you come back, I decide to put on the central heating. But I don't really understand how central heating works. By the way, I genuinely don't. I'm terrible with the thermostat. It's up and on, down and off and on again. I really just don't get how it works. And I actually end up burning your house down. And on return from your holiday with all your souvenirs and your happy memories, you come back to a burning pile of ashes. Now, the thing is, some would say, actually, I'm not at fault morally, because my intentions were good. My intention was to have a nice, warm, welcoming home for when you came back. Okay, it's not great that I burnt your house down, but my intentions, my motives were pure. Others would say, actually, your motives are irrelevant. It's the outcome, and you should be based and judged on how things pan out. So therefore, I am morally responsible. It's quite an interesting idea, and the film does bring that issue up, because actually, what is your motivation for doing something, and do we judge people solely by their intentions, by their outcomes, or is it a combination of both? I think that's something to really consider. I think the other final thing to say, just very quickly as well, about Batman Begins, is that this idea of fighting crime and the law, is he above the law or below the law, is he the law? That's something that kicks off as well, and how he works with the chief of police. So that's a very interesting idea. It did pretty well at the cinema, made a few quid, and then we have in 2008 The Dark Knight, and this is a remarkable piece of work, because first of all, financially, it was the first comic book movie to make over $1 billion. But I think as well, with The Dark Knight, it continued this idea of showing us Batman in a different way. And Christopher Nolan was particularly influenced by a film called Heat, which is a film from 1995 directed by Michael Mann, which is about a cop and a robber, and effectively they're two sides of the same coin. And that is a scene which is played out, an idea that is played out in The Dark Knight, because the big enemy is the Joker, and of course the Joker is played by the Oscar-winning Heath Ledger. There's a really interesting scene where the Joker is causing chaos around Gotham City, and of course that's the main theme of the second film. The first one, fear; the second one, chaos. And Batman and the Joker are here in an interrogation scene where Batman is trying to work out what's happened to his friend Rachel Dawes and the chief of police, James Gordon. Joker knows that Batman won't kill him, because that is his one rule. He doesn't kill anybody. Interesting enough, though, in the early comic books, Batman did actually have a gun with him very, very early on. But it's an interesting discussion about absolute morality and relative morality. So absolute morality is when you believe there is a rule or a set of rules that absolutely must not be broken under any circumstances. Okay, so it might be about not killing somebody. It might be about always telling the truth. It might be about always making sure that you pay your taxes. Okay. On the other hand, relative morality is flexible. It's when you say, well, I think in certain situations you should behave like this, or I think it might be acceptable to do this. So let's just give you a little example. So it might be that in terms of there's a famous philosopher called Immanuel Kant, who is a German philosopher. He said, well, what if a mad axeman was to come up to your door and said, I'm looking for your friend, I want to kill him. Do you know where he is? I don't know why he said it in that voice, but there we go. And what Kant would say is, well, you have a thing here, because if you lie, then you are breaking a kind of well-known universal truth, which is that you should not lie and you should tell the truth, but your friend dies. But if you play it relatively to that situation and say, well, okay, I'm going to lie, but then does that mean by lying you and telling the axeman, no, I don't know where they are, then have you undermined this idea of not lying and telling the truth? Or think about English money, pound notes, where it says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £10 or whatever it may be. That's an absolute. If the Bank of England didn't make that £10 note worth £10, okay, then the whole economic system would break down in many ways. You can't have the bank saying relatively, well, this week we'll make it worth £8, next week maybe worth £11.50. So I think that's really interesting. So are you actually, or is it acceptable to break your own rules sometimes, or society rules, to make a point? And of course, there are two sides of the same coin. And you have this idea that in the same way that the Joker likes causing chaos, Batman likes to try and bring about order. So it's a very intriguing concept that's played out in this very. By the way, I think that lamp you can actually buy somewhere. I think it's actually a bit of merchandise. It'd be pretty cool, actually. It'd be quite nice to have. Anyway, let's have a look at the next film, which is, yeah, by the way, I know you've probably noticed, still haven't mastered Google Slides, from 2012. I don't know why we say 2012, 2012. We don't say 2005, 2005. Anyway, The Dark Knight Rises was the final movie, and this one was all about pain. And Batman faces a nemesis called Bane, who's this pumped up terrorist played by Tom Hardy behind a mask. And if you watch any Tom Hardy films, he's often doing this behind a mask. And what he does is basically bring Gotham's to its knees. He lays siege to it with a threat of a huge nuclear explosion. And of course, Batman saves the day. Or does he? There is an absolutely fascinating moment here. About midpoint through the film, Alfred, played by Michael Caine, the faithful butler to Bruce Wayne, says this. Excuse me. And he's very upset with Bruce Wayne. Thinks he's taking things too far. He can't keep being Batman. And says, I remember when you left Gotham, and he's referring back to Batman when Batman Begins. Every year I took a holiday. So I won't do the Michael Caine voice. I went to Florence. There's this cafe on the banks of the Arno. Every fine evening, I'd sit there and order a Ferno Branca. Apologies for a pronunciation. I had this fancy that I would look across the tables and I'd see you there with a wife and maybe a couple of kids. You wouldn't say anything to me, nor me to you, but we'd both know that you'd made it, that you were happy. And what's interesting, at the end of the movie, there's this deliberate ambiguity when Batman saves Gotham from the bomb going off as to whether Batman actually survives or not. And the second to last scene is of this fantasy of Alfred going to Florence, ordering a drink and seeing Bruce Wayne there. And it's really interesting because this idea of eschatology comes up, of being concerned with death, judgment. It's a big idea in religions. And of course, destination of the soul, where we go when we pass away. I just thought it was really interesting that the second to last scene is that. And the wording is very precise. Alfred says he has not a dream, he has a fantasy. And there is this ambiguity as to whether Batman, Bruce Wayne, survives his efforts, his sacrifice to save Gotham, which of course he does, or not. And I've watched the film a few times, and every time I watch the film, the conclusion to the trilogy, I come away slightly differently, thinking sometimes maybe he did survive, or sometimes he didn't. And I think that's a great skill to the director, Christopher Nolan, as well as the whole team behind it. So that's the Dark Knight Trilogy, and as always, enjoy the movies, see what themes you can find in them. Thank you for watching, and as always, amongst yourselves, feel free to chat, like and subscribe, but most importantly, enjoy your learning.